Keanu Reeves had no idea that an ordinary visit to the library would become one of the most memorable events of his life. Nobody expected that a peaceful reading hall would turn into the stage of an emotional conflict that could melt even the coldest hearts. Your life can change in an instant. Why wait? Subscribe to my channel so we can move forward together, find inspiration, and discover new horizons. New videos await you every day at exactly 2 p.m. Don't miss the moment when everything begins to change. Keanu sat at a small table in the spacious reading room of a large city library. The exact location didn't matter, it was simply a place where people came to immerse themselves in books and enjoy silence. Morning light streamed through tall windows and scattered gently across long oak tables. The air carried a faint scent of freshly printed pages mixed with the delicate mustiness of ancient tomes, neatly arranged on endless shelves. Keanu was dressed, as usual, in very simple attire, a black t-shirt without flashy logos, dark jeans, and comfortable shoes. A slight bit of stubble and a gentle smile made him blend in with other visitors. No one would guess this was a world-famous actor. Though absorbed in a thick book, Keanu still noticed everything happening around him. The library was calm, with only occasional whispers. At a nearby table sat a young man named Oliver, reserved and shy. He had a congenital speech impediment that caused him to struggle with certain words. Oliver looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept well. His gaze showed both apprehension and a thirst for knowledge. On his table lay a stack of self-improvement books, indicating he was eager to learn how to articulate better and prove to the world he had much to offer beyond first impressions. In another part of the reading room sat Tony, a middle-aged man with an irritated expression and abrasive mannerisms. The look in his eyes signaled constant discontent, as if merely having to be quiet in a library bothered him. Tony clearly lacked tolerance or empathy. Any perceived weakness seemed to give him an excuse to raise his voice or use sarcasm. He was dressed in a gaudy shirt and loud accessories, someone who wanted attention not because there was something truly remarkable about him, but because he craved being noticed at any cost. For about half an hour, Keanu watched Tony cough, cast sidelong glances at anyone daring to break the silence, and show clear annoyance at the slightest whisper. Yet tension was building gradually. Oliver, absorbed in his books, was trying to take notes and occasionally whispered lines to himself to practice pronunciation. His voice was hesitant and quiet, but that whisper seemed enough to annoy Tony. The man's sideways looks and over-the-top sighs made it obvious he was about to lose his temper. Sensing the conflict, Keanu remained close by. He hoped Tony would calm down and not resort to outright insults, but within a minute it was clear an intervention might be necessary. As soon as Oliver raised his voice a tiny bit, Tony snapped loudly and with biting clarity. "Hey, buddy, can't you go practice somewhere else? Or is this library the only place you can afford to work on that voice of yours?" Oliver blushed, his cheeks burning, and he nervously fidgeted with the corner of a page. He tried explaining that the library provided good books and a peaceful environment for him to practice. But his voice trembled even more, his words jumbled, and all Tony heard was insecure mumbling. Other patrons glanced in their direction but, as often happens, chose not to intervene. Keanu, only half watching the scene, sensed the rising tension. He hoped Tony might refrain from outright bullying, but after that last jab, he knew he had to step in. Tony stared at Oliver coldly. "Go on, say something else. I'm curious how much more you can mangle your words." Tony's words were so cutting that a hush fell over the reading room, broken only by the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Oliver's eyes filled with confusion. He had never found it easy to deal with insults, and in this sacred place of quiet study, they stung even more. He was about to gather his things and flee to avoid further humiliation when he heard a calm but steady voice. "Excuse me, but this library is for everyone, my friend. Maybe let him be so he can focus on his work." Tony turned, looking at Keanu with contempt, apparently not recognizing him. Tilting his head, Tony smirked. And who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Maybe it's you who needs to shut up. Keanu remained composed, not showing anger or fear. He took a step forward. I'm not giving orders, just asking for courtesy. The young man isn't bothering anyone, he's trying to improve his speech. We're in a library, where people are supposed to respect each other. Tony sneered. Oh, really? So next you'll tell me how to stand, how to breathe, and how to dress. He spoke loudly and mockingly, enough to make some visitors uncomfortable, fearing a scene might escalate. Yet Keanu stayed calm, his voice gentle but firm. You can dress however you like. But when your words start to hurt someone else, it's not about personal choice anymore, it's about respect. Tony's lips curled further, sarcasm dripping from his voice. And you think you can preach to me? Or maybe you're a psychologist who'll teach everyone proper manners. Oliver, hearing this, tucked his head between his shoulders. He felt terrible that someone was causing trouble because of him. Perhaps he was already blaming himself for coming here. Noticing Oliver's distress, Keanu placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder, silently conveying, "You're not in the wrong." Seeing this support, Tony grew enraged. He seemed to hate that someone was siding with this weird kid he deemed unworthy of respect. He took a few aggressive steps forward, trying to physically intimidate Keanu by standing very close. So, you're his protector now? Listen, buddy, I pay my taxes, I have every right to be here. You two are the ones who should leave so I can work in peace. Keanu met Tony's glare, sympathy but no fear in his eyes. He leaned his head slightly. I'm sorry you're having a bad day. But your comfort shouldn't depend on humiliating others. Oliver is just trying to develop himself, he's not doing anything wrong. Oliver? Tony scoffed. I don't care what his name is. If he can't speak properly, he should sit at home and practice alone. An oppressive silence fell over the library reading room. Some patrons rose, ready to call for a librarian or security guard, but Keanu gestured for them to wait, still hoping to resolve things peacefully. Tony, however, showed no sign of backing down, his anger clearly escalating. Don't worry, Keanu whispered softly to Oliver, we'll handle this. Oliver nodded timidly, grateful yet trying not to meet Tony's furious gaze. While Tony fumed, apparently trying to look fierce, Keanu recalled a moment from his youth when people teased him for being different. The pain never fully goes away, but this was no time for personal memories. Right now, Oliver needed protection. Sensing the situation worsening, Tony raised his voice even more, ignoring the silent alarm on everyone's faces. Some visitors, though disapproving, still hesitated to speak up. The elderly librarian peeked from behind a bookshelf, obviously considering calling security. But Keanu signaled for her to wait. He wanted to avoid a bigger scene in such a quiet place. Hey, Tony addressed Keanu, pointing first at him and then at Oliver, you want me to leave this kid alone? Then tell him to shut it and stop flaunting his shortcomings. He spat out the word shortcomings with such disgust that it cut straight into Oliver's soul, and into Keanu's patience. Keanu frowned. Polite words were no longer working, but he tried one more time. I recognize your right to read and work in peace, he said, carefully controlling his tone, but Oliver also has a right to improve himself. Nobody likes being insulted, especially for something they can't instantly change. Enough with your rights and respect, Tony growled, glaring at the two of them. What are you, some kind of preacher? Maybe you want to fight? Oliver gasped at the mention of a fight. Tony appeared to be on the verge of physical aggression, but Keanu merely shook his head. Fight? No. Violence won't solve anything, it'll only make matters worse. Tony took another threatening step, now just inches from Keanu. The actor didn't flinch, only observing Tony's angry face. Tony suddenly snorted. Coward. He shoved Oliver, sending the young man stumbling with his books. Keanu quickly grabbed Oliver's arm to steady him. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Everyone saw Tony cross the line. Yet still, nobody rushed forward, as though paralyzed by shock. "Calm down," Keanu said under his breath, mostly to himself, trying to keep his own anger in check. He knew if he lost control, things would escalate. But he also couldn't let Tony keep abusing Oliver. Conflicting feelings churned inside him, wanting a peaceful end but also wanting to protect the victim. Just then, someone in the room whispered. "Doesn't he realize it looks like Keanu Reeves?" Tony paid no attention, but Keanu sighed inwardly. Someone had recognized him. The actor knew that if his identity became a focal point, the scene could blow up online. Tony, however, remained clueless, believing the slim man in the black t-shirt was just a nobody playing hero. "Why are you all staring at me?" Tony shouted at everyone. "If you're so fond of these two, go with them. I was trying to work, and they caused a ruckus." By now, most people had no doubt Tony couldn't handle individuality or any differences in others. Tony glared at Keanu, waiting for a reaction, and he got one. Keanu helped Oliver back to his seat, picked up the books, then turned calmly to Tony. "How about this? If you really want to show your strength, do it in a dignified way, show understanding instead of aggression. It's harder than just insulting and shoving people." That remark only inflamed Tony further. He shot Oliver a furious look, then glared back at Keanu. "What do you know, wise guy?" he nearly shouted. "I had to fight my entire life. Nobody ever helped me. Now, when I just want some quiet, I have to deal with a guy who can't talk straight and another guy playing a moral knight." Silence fell again. Keanu took a deep breath and spoke softly. "Maybe you're the one who needs help, seeing how angry you are at everyone." Tony let out a burst of hysterical laughter, tilting his head back. "Help? Me? Are you joking? You think I'm some pitiful creature who needs pity?" Keanu shook his head. "No. I see a person in pain, lashing out at the world. But you don't have to keep going down this path." Tony waved dismissively, trying to brush off Keanu's words, but it was clear they struck deeper than he wanted to admit. He opened his mouth to retort, then his phone rang. Checking the screen, he stepped to a nearby window, nearly knocking over a chair. The call must have been important, given his expression. Oliver watched all of this as if paralyzed. He was breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. Keanu, noticing Oliver's condition, leaned in. "You okay? Did you get hurt?" Oliver shook his head, indicating he wasn't physically hurt, though the emotional impact was clear. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder and smiled gently. "Don't let him or anyone else break your confidence. You're doing great, just keep going." "Thank you," Oliver whispered, still stuttering from the shock. I didn't mean to cause a scene." "You're not at fault," Keanu replied softly. "People come in all types. The important thing is not to let someone's cruelty make you doubt yourself." Others still watched with uneasy silence. Some offered Oliver help, asking if he needed medical attention. Others hovered, phones in hand, either filming or quietly discussing the scene. A few recognized Keanu but hesitated to approach, sensing he was trying to keep the peace. Tony finished his phone call and returned, looking even more annoyed. "Now I have problems at the office," he snapped, glaring at Keanu. "Thanks a lot, Mr. Nice Guy. You distracted me from important work." Then he turned to Oliver. "Fine, I'll leave your friend alone. But both of you are still in my way." Keanu met his gaze. "You can read in peace. We're not here to bother you. But I'm asking you not to insult Oliver or attack him because of his differences." Tony snorted. "Your requests mean nothing to me. Just don't butt into my business again." Some patrons, seeing the tension subside, returned to reading, though the uneasy atmosphere remained. The librarian hovered behind her desk, instructing a security guard to stay on standby. For a few minutes, everything was relatively calm. Tony sat sideways at his table, huffing at intervals but not provoking a new argument. Keanu helped Oliver reorganize his notes, which had scattered when he nearly fell. Suddenly, Oliver's folder burst open, and printed handouts spilled under Tony's feet. Oliver bent to retrieve them, fumbling anxiously. "Careful. Can't you see I have important documents here?" Tony hissed. Oliver mumbled an apology, clearly flustered. His hands shook, making it hard to pick up his papers. Keanu bent down to help. Then Tony, as if seizing a chance to deliver a final blow, muttered, "These special people are so clumsy. But what else can you expect?" The insult landed cruelly, piercing Oliver and stirring Keanu's resolve. Keanu looked up at Tony, voice still calm but firm. "All right, enough. Can you explain why you treat people who just want to learn or live normally this way?" Tony growled. "I don't have to explain anything to anyone." "Maybe not," Keanu said quietly. "But if you keep acting like this, you'll ruin your own life. Respect isn't weakness, it's the strength that keeps us from bitterness." Tony opened his mouth again but stopped upon seeing a group of people filming or ready to film. Realizing the attention on him, he roughly gathered his papers and stood up. "You're all crazy," he muttered, then turned to Keanu. "And you, Mr. Morality, can keep your sermons." He headed for the exit. Near the door stood the librarian and two security guards, apparently waiting to speak with him. Tony paused, looked back at Keanu, then at the crowd, who clearly disapproved of his behavior. Suddenly, someone in the crowd spoke loudly enough for all to hear. "Wait a second, that really is Keanu Reeves." A ripple of recognition spread. Some whispered his name, and a middle-aged woman gasped. "I can't believe it. He's so famous yet so humble." Tony froze, blinking in surprise. "What? Keanu Reeves?" he repeated uncertainly. "No, that can't be." He scrutinized the man in the simple black shirt and jeans, staring into his face. His haughty demeanor evaporated. Tony's eyes widened in shock, his lips trembled. "This can't be happening. Did I really just insult a global film star?" Are you, really him?" Tony stammered, voice suddenly unsure. "I." He looked around, seeing reproachful gazes from bystanders and admiring looks toward Keanu. Keanu softly stepped forward, still holding Oliver's scattered papers. "Yes, I'm Keanu. But I'd like to set that aside and handle this peacefully." Tony, who moments earlier was so confrontational, looked as though he'd had the wind knocked out of him. Shame and uncertainty replaced his arrogance. Nervously trying to salvage dignity, his voice quivered. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I just had a bad day at work." But the truth was deeper. Tony realized he had behaved horribly toward Oliver, a world-famous actor who'd stood up for someone vulnerable. He felt the weight of his own hostility reflecting back at him. Keanu spoke gently. "Look, I understand life can be tough. But insulting others is never the way to handle stress." Tony glanced at Oliver, then back at Keanu. His face was flushed, a testament to how self-conscious he felt under everyone's scrutiny. In that moment, he was fully exposed, recognized as the bully. Some people even looked relieved to see him humbled. I'm sorry," Tony repeated, his voice strained. "I acted like a jerk." A hush fell. Keanu glanced at Oliver, gauging whether he was willing to accept Tony's apology. Oliver clutched his handouts, still breathing shakily, but there was a glimmer of hope in his expression. "Thank you for apologizing," Oliver said quietly, still stammering a bit. "But you really hurt me." Tony closed his eyes, as if struck by guilt. Then, more steadily, he turned to Oliver and Keanu. "I'm sorry again. I don't know what came over me." A long pause followed. Keanu looked at Oliver, who gave a small nod, indicating he accepted the apology. The tension in the room finally eased. A few onlookers, who had been watching in silence, exhaled in relief. Tony hung his head. "I guess I should go," he said, voice subdued. Keanu touched Tony's arm briefly. "You can stay and read if you like. The library is for everyone." "I'm too embarrassed," Tony admitted. "But, sorry again." With that, he hurried toward the exit, pausing only when the librarian politely reminded him not to disturb patrons in the future. Tony left, carrying the weight of shame and, possibly, a seed of self-reflection. When the door closed behind Tony, there was a collective pause, then a handful of people broke into quiet applause. A young woman approached Keanu shyly. "Thank you for stopping him. Are you really Keanu Reeves?" He smiled warmly and answered softly. "Yes, I am. But it's not that important. What matters is that we treat each other with understanding." "You're right," she said, looking a bit starstruck. "Thank you again." Whispers buzzed around the reading room. Though this was a library, the crowd felt a surge of curiosity. The security guard gently reminded everyone to keep their voices down. Oliver looked at Keanu, his eyes wide. He seemed to grasp that his defender was not just a kind stranger but a globally recognized star. That realization filled him with gratitude and awe. I want to thank you," Oliver said, trying his best to speak clearly. "I never thought anyone would stand up for me." "No thanks needed," Keanu replied gently. "I just did what anyone should do." Oliver smiled, a bit more relaxed but still overwhelmed. "Could I help you find a book, or something else?" Keanu was touched by Oliver's humility. Glancing at the pile of books he had retrieved from the floor, Keanu read the title of one. "I was actually looking for something on philosophy. I like reading that in my free time." "Oh, we have a great section here," Oliver offered. "I'll show you." They walked together to a far shelf holding works by renowned philosophers. Along the way, Oliver shared that he came to the library to escape the noise at home and focus on his speech exercises. He explained how practicing reading aloud helped him gain confidence and how he dreamed of one day speaking publicly to inspire people not to fear their own differences. "That's wonderful," Keanu said, visibly impressed. "I'm sure you can make it happen." "Yes, after what happened today, it's like something woke up inside me. I want people to see more than my defect, I want them to hear me speak about important things." They arrived at the philosophy section. Keanu examined the spines before selecting an old volume that looked rarely opened. He read the cover, then smiled. "This suits me perfectly." "Thanks, Oliver." Oliver smiled in return. Just then, the elderly librarian appeared again, bringing a couple of other books. "These might be of interest, Mr. Reeves." "Thank you," Keanu replied, accepting them. "And I'm sorry about the commotion." She shook her head. "It's all right. Maybe that man will change his ways. You did a good thing. It's not often celebrities remain so down-to-earth." She quietly returned to her station. Keanu and Oliver took their new stack of books to a corner of the reading room with comfortable chairs, where they sat under a soft lamp. Oliver asked about how to overcome fear when speaking. Keanu, speaking like an old friend, shared a few personal stories, without going too deep, but enough to encourage Oliver. Each little detail felt precious to the young man. During their conversation, a young blogger approached, politely asking if he could record a short clip for social media. "I'd love to post a quick video about how you're helping Oliver. It might inspire people." Keanu smiled modestly. "I don't mind, but only if Oliver is okay with it." Oliver, though shy, nodded. A few minutes later, a brief clip was shot, showing Keanu and Oliver discussing books, Oliver mentioning his dream of being a speaker, and Keanu encouraging him while calling on viewers to be more tolerant. The blogger beamed. "I'll share it with the hashtag, kindness is stronger than hate. I think people will love seeing moments like this. I hope it spreads positivity," Keanu replied. As the recording finished, Oliver looked at Keanu with renewed confidence. "You know, my life has been difficult. People at home once told me I'd never amount to anything if I couldn't speak normally. They said I shouldn't even try public speaking because my speech would never be perfect." He paused to steady himself. "But I refuse to give up. I believe I can still convey meaningful ideas. My condition doesn't make me less of a person." Keanu listened intently, nodding supportively. He recalled his own losses and hardships. There had been times he felt isolated and misunderstood. He gently patted Oliver's shoulder. "You're right. Your condition is part of you, but it doesn't define who you are." For the first time that day, Oliver's face lit up with a genuine, broad smile. They continued exploring the books for a while. Keanu read aloud passages from philosophy texts, and Oliver repeated them, practicing articulation. Their quiet dialogue had a comforting melody of its own, complementing the serene library atmosphere. After about half an hour, the librarian approached again. "Pardon me, I hate to interrupt, but we'll be closing for lunch soon. Staff needs to do a brief inventory." Keanu and Oliver exchanged glances. They would need to leave the reading hall for a bit. Keanu offered to treat Oliver to tea at the small cafe in the lobby. Oliver accepted with gratitude. Soon they were seated at a little table near the lobby windows, sipping tea and talking. A few people recognized Keanu from afar but stayed respectful, occasionally stepping closer for a quick autograph or discreet photo. The mood was warm and curious rather than chaotic. An elderly gentleman approached. "Mr. Reeves, I saw how you stood up for that young man. I always thought celebrities wouldn't bother helping a nobody. You've shown otherwise." "Thank you," Keanu answered politely. "But I don't think I did anything special. Anyone else should have done the same." Oliver beamed, touched by the remark. "Because of you, I feel more confident now. This morning, I was sure nothing good would come of today." Keanu drank his tea, smiling gently. Sometimes life surprises us in the best ways. The key is not to fear those surprises. When the lunch break ended and the library reopened, Oliver suggested returning to the reading room, but Keanu had appointments later that evening. Before saying goodbye, the actor shared a contact for a speech therapist friend who'd helped many people with speech disorders. Oliver couldn't believe his luck. Such an opportunity might never have come had he not shown up at the library that day. "Good luck," Keanu said, handing Oliver the note. "I hope it helps you reach your dream." "Thank you. I'll call right away." "This is incredible," Oliver said, his excitement obvious. "Someday, I'd like to give a talk and personally thank you for everything." "I'd be honored to hear you speak," Keanu replied warmly. "Remember, your voice doesn't just sound physically, it resonates through your heart." They exchanged a friendly hug. Several onlookers found themselves moved by the sight. Even the blogger filming earlier looked close to tears, promising he'd edit a short, kindness video to post online. Keanu stepped outside, where a small group of fans had gathered. He signed a few autographs, posed for quick photos, and then quietly slipped away into a side street. Yet the sense of joy stayed with him. He knew he had made a difference in someone's life that day. Meanwhile, Oliver stood by the library entrance, clutching that precious note. He felt his heart pounding with renewed hope. Returning to his table, he found his speech training books still open on the pages he'd been studying. Except now, they held a whole new significance. "I won't give up," he whispered, attempting to pronounce the words more clearly. "Thank you, Keanu." From that day on, no one in the library looked at Oliver with condescension. Many who witnessed the confrontation began greeting him, asking how he was doing, and even offering help if he needed resources. It was as though one act of kindness had started a chain of transformations in people's attitudes. Word got out, soon a short video surfaced on social media, garnering supportive comments for Oliver. "How wonderful that there are actors like him," some wrote. "Poor guy, I hope his life turns around," others sympathized. "Let's all be kinder," yet more exclaimed. And at the end of the video, Keanu's gentle smile and soft-spoken words rang out, "You never know whose spirit you might lift." One small act of kindness can change someone's entire world. A few days later, Tony returned to the library. People recognized him from the incident and eyed him warily. He felt ashamed, aware that many knew him as the aggressor who insulted a young man and failed to recognize a famous star. Still, he forced himself to come back, hoping to make amends. Stepping into the reading room, Tony saw Oliver at the same table. Oliver was deeply focused on his books, practicing speech exercises. Spotting Tony, he stiffened slightly but didn't flee as he once might have. Tony approached slowly. "Hey, I don't know if you remember me." Oliver looked up, cautious. "I remember," he said quietly, wringing his hands. "I wanted to tell you something," Tony began haltingly. "The way I acted was unacceptable. I realize I hurt you. I'd like to apologize again, if you'll let me." Oliver was silent a moment. Then he took a breath. "I appreciate you saying that. We're all human, and everyone makes mistakes." Tony nodded, avoiding eye contact. "Yeah. I've done a lot of thinking since that day. When I found out who that guy was, that he was Keanu Reeves, I felt so stupid. I realized how blind I was to the possibility that you might be important, too. Anyone can be. And even if you weren't important, that's still no excuse for what I did." "It's good you see that now," Oliver said carefully. "Maybe we can start over." Tony exhaled in relief, a faint smile ghosting over his lips. "Yeah. Thanks." They shook hands. And in that moment, it became clear that Keanu's single act of kindness had started a ripple effect, touching not just Oliver but Tony as well. It underlined that simple truth: even a small gesture of decency can spark real change. Weeks later, there was a small reading event at the library where volunteers took turns reading aloud. Oliver had gathered the courage to participate. He selected a short passage from a self-improvement book and read it, focusing on clarity. The room was filled with patrons and literature enthusiasts. No one mocked him, they listened with respect, understanding how far he'd come. At the back of the audience stood Tony, arms folded, looking humbled yet proud. When Oliver finished, applause followed. He looked at the crowd, some smiling, some waving in encouragement. His heart overflowed with gratitude for the man who inspired him at just the right time. Though Keanu wasn't there, Oliver felt his supportive presence. Time passed. The clip of Keanu defending Oliver spread across social networks. Most comments were full of admiration, hope, and renewed faith in humanity. People confessed they felt encouraged to do the same if they saw injustice. Even casual viewers sensed a warm sincerity in the story. Not long after, an anonymous donation arrived at the library, boxes of new books on psychology, personal development, and philanthropy. The attached note read, "For those who strive to become better." Sometimes words on a page are the best medicine for the soul. With love, from someone inspired. No one knew if it was Keanu, a thankful visitor, or someone else. But it led the library to create a new section, Books on Kindness and Self-Development. Oliver, riding the wave of inspiration, began volunteering with a group supporting people with speech challenges. He shared the methods that had helped him. Surprisingly, Tony sometimes dropped by those meetings. Though still a bit rough around the edges, Tony seemed to be rebuilding himself. He'd listen to Oliver's explanations, occasionally asking questions, not about speech, but about how to respect and understand others better. You know, Tony confided to Oliver one evening, I used to think I was the strongest when I put others down. Now I see that was my weakness. I was afraid people wouldn't take me seriously unless I acted tough. Turned out it was the opposite. I used to be terrified of others' opinions, Oliver admitted. But now I'm learning not to be embarrassed by my voice. We're all afraid of something. The important thing is not letting fear turn into aggression. Tony nodded, absorbing the words. Perhaps Keanu's statement, respect is strength, had truly stuck with him. Soon, Oliver made notable progress in his speech training. He began taking opportunities to speak at local gatherings, and once he even presented at a small personal development conference. There, he shared his story, how he had faced mockery, then met someone who restored his self-confidence through a single act of kindness. The conference went well, and many attendees said they left feeling inspired. Meanwhile, curiosity about Keanu's gallant act persisted. Journalists asked about it, fans wanted more details. Keanu sidestepped the spotlight, repeatedly saying he didn't see himself as a hero, he simply believed in standing up for people when they're vulnerable. That humility only increased people's admiration, reinforcing the story's genuine warmth. Slowly, tangible changes seemed to take place in everyday life. Maybe someone refrained from criticizing a person with a disability, maybe someone else listened more attentively to a stammering friend. These may have been small steps, but collectively they formed a more empathetic environment. A few months later, the library underwent major renovations. The reading hall grew brighter, with newly built booths designed for speech practice. Oliver helped staff arrange donated books. Tony even contributed supplies from his workplace. Though he could still be brusque, it was clear he was making an effort to be better. Sometimes he joked, "Hope Mr. Reeves doesn't drop by to check on me." Keanu, meanwhile, was away filming. But on the day the library unveiled its new area, he suddenly appeared at the entrance. Oliver spotted that familiar figure in a black t-shirt and jeans and hurried over, beaming. "Hello. You're back. I'm so glad to see you," Oliver said, his speech notably more confident than before. Keanu smiled. "Hey there. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Looks like a lot has changed here." Oliver eagerly explained. "Yes, we expanded. There's now a space for group readings and for people with speech difficulties. I sometimes volunteer. Do you want to see it?" Keanu agreed and followed Oliver, observing the cozy new booths equipped with microphones and seating for practicing public speaking. Motivational posters decorated the walls, and a shelf showcased those donated books. Oliver explained how free weekly sessions offered guidance on overcoming fear and projecting one's voice, and it was all funded by volunteers and local sponsors. "You've done a lot," Keanu remarked when they reached the last booth. "I remember when you could barely say 3 words in a row without panicking. Now look at you, you're practically an expert." "I wouldn't say expert, but thanks," Oliver replied with a slight blush. "If you hadn't stepped in, I might have quit trying altogether." At that moment, Tony walked in carrying bags of office supplies. Seeing Keanu, he tensed but then approached awkwardly. Clearly, he had something to say. "Hi," he said to Oliver, then nodded at Keanu. "Good to see you again. I just wanted to say. I'm glad it turned out the way it did. I was horrible back then." Keanu offered a conciliatory smile. "We can all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them. I can tell you've changed." Tony dropped his gaze. "Yeah, thanks for not letting me continue being who I was." They stood quietly for a few seconds. Then Tony handed Oliver the supplies and mumbled a brief goodbye, heading out on other errands. Keanu watched him leave, realizing Tony was no longer the arrogant bully he'd been. He was a man wrestling with past regrets and making a genuine effort. And though old wounds might never fully vanish, the journey toward healing had begun. "I'm proud of both of you," Keanu said softly to Oliver. "Tony's doing his part, too. Your story has become something bigger than just you, it's for everyone willing to change." Oliver nodded with a gentle smile. "I believe that too." Oliver then gave Keanu a brief tour of the redesigned library, pointing out new shelves and greeting visitors. People smiled at Keanu, grateful for the day he'd stepped in to prevent a tragedy. Keanu simply shrugged it off, repeating that anyone else would have done the same. His humility made the story resonate even more. Finally, they paused by the exit. Oliver looked at Keanu, voice quiet but filled with emotion. "You have no idea how much you changed my life." "Maybe I have some idea," Keanu joked softly. "But remember, I didn't change your life, you did that yourself. I was just there at the right moment." Oliver exhaled, his chest tight with gratitude. He knew more work lay ahead. Not all problems vanish overnight, but now he had the most important thing, belief in himself and in other people. "Thank you," he repeated, unable to find grander words. "Thank you for not giving up," Keanu answered, gazing at Oliver with warm respect. "Remember what I said, even small acts of kindness can change the world. Your success will inspire so many." Keanu stepped outside to a discreet car waiting for him. A few passers-by recognized him, but he just nodded politely before getting in, not wanting to attract more attention. The car pulled away, leaving behind the library, a place where something extraordinary had happened. In that quiet reading hall, hearts had been changed. Though it might be a single dot on the map, an experience like this can spread far beyond one location, through personal accounts, shared videos, and future encounters. That evening, when Oliver got home, he checked the internet to find thousands of comments on the blogger's video. People shared their stories of being ridiculed, of wanting to find help, of now feeling hope after seeing Keanu's example. Each comment echoed one sentiment: "Thank you for restoring my faith in human kindness." Oliver smiled through tears of joy. He realized that this was just the beginning of his journey, there would be more obstacles and more steps toward self-improvement. But he understood now that no one is truly alone. A single act of kindness can ignite a chain reaction of empathy and mutual support. In the final segment of his conference speech, later posted online, Oliver delivered a simple message that became a motto for many who watched. Kindness isn't weakness. It's the key that unlocks people's hearts. Even one small act can lead to a wave of change. And once that wave builds, it doesn't just transform one person's life, it can influence an entire community. Those words, combined with Keanu's actions, lived on in the memories of everyone seeking a little more light in the world. Because sometimes, it just takes one moment of standing up for a stranger to spark a fire of transformation. May that fire burn brighter in the hearts of all who hear this story. Dear viewers, remember, every one of us is capable of helping someone in a difficult situation. You never know whose life can be forever changed by your kindness. Offer a helping hand or a simple word of encouragement. It might be all it takes to restore someone's faith in themselves. As Keanu's example shows, true compassion isn't about fame or status. It's about having an open heart and refusing to walk past someone in pain. If you see injustice, speak up. Your voice could be the start of a lasting transformation. As someone once said, a small act of kindness can change the world. Let this be a reminder that every single day brings a new opportunity to do good. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.